Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on our webinar. Yes, nice to see a few faces. Lovely jubbly. You can unmute if you want to ask questions as we go through. All of you are enjoying a webinar. We're going to talk all things annexes. My name is Nigel. I'm one of the sales and development managers for iHus, and I'm joined today with my colleague Ollie Wright, who is the director of the NAPC, who deals with all our planning.
Good afternoon, everybody.
So we'll be sharing things with you today. We've gone through the introductions. We're going to be talking about annexes versus garden rooms. What's the main difference between them? We'll be talking about iHus annex models and options that are available, so it's easier for you to understand. We're going to talk about Open HUS, which is where you can view a real annex. We're going to be going through planning permission, which is a very detailed part of our webinar today, which is where Ollie specialises, as he's the head of our planning department. We'll talk about the build process, and then we'll open the floor to questions. I have some questions already, which we'll deal with when we get to question times, and they've been submitted by Leslie, and I look forward to answering those questions for you as we move through, Leslie. To kick things off, there you can see an old man and a very young man, and we'll move into garden annexes versus garden rooms, and what's the difference? Well, self-explanatory on screen. You can see the two images there, left and right. An annex is a self-contained living space, so it's a habitable dwelling, somewhere where you can sleep and enjoy your annex to its full. It's built within the grounds of an existing dwelling, within the curtilage of that dwelling. And Oliver will explain curtilage as we go to the planning side of things. It must comply to building regulations. It must have a functional link between the main house and the annex itself. It will share access and it will share the services with the main dwelling. And it's the same build quality you'd feel in a bungalow, because essentially it is a timber framed bungalow in the garden. It includes bedrooms, bathrooms, kitchens, living areas, specifically designed to be lived in all year round. Now, when you look at a garden room are not designed to be lived in, nor can they be lived in. They're normally built in a thing called permitted development, which means you don't need planning permission, and they're for occasional use. Things like gymnasiums, offices, might just be a summer house or an orangery. Usually ideal for that office or gym. It's classed as incidental use, as I explained. It's not usually insulated, so it's not complying to the building regulations for the heat values, etc. Has lower ceiling height because the development rights means that you cannot exceed 2.5 meters in height, and you can't sleep in them, not without planning permission. Okay, so that's the first main difference between a garden room and an annex. So what does an iHus annex look like? Let's see some real examples. Now this lady is Janet Whitley. She opted in for a bespoke building, and that word bespoke is very key to what we do. If you've been on our website, you'll see that we now have two model ranges, and those two model ranges are the 3632 range and the classic range. The 3632 range that you see on the website is our standard build. That's built to British Standard 3632, hence its name, 3632, and it is a fixed build. So we can't move the windows around, we can't move the doors and things like that. It can be a pitched roof as well as a flat roof, but other than that, it's a fixed stadium build. And that suits some people, it doesn't suit everyone. Now, in this case, Janet wanted certain dimensions of the build slightly different She wanted to move the rooms around. And our buildings are totally and utterly bespoke if we go down the route of the classic range. This one is based on the Hickleton model. And if you've downloaded the brochure, you'll see there's 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And this was built in her daughter's garden. So we're going to, now this is the exterior. Now it was a flat build choice that she went for. You'll see the dark grey stepped area that goes into the building. And this building is a flat roof with an additional canopy. That illuminated canopy that overhangs the building is an optional extra that she went for on this build. And the colour, this one is grey-green. We have 4 standard colours, and then we have a range of colours for other choices, which are slightly more expensive. And we also have timber-cladded buildings as well. So as you see, we have balustrade around this decked area. And because she's a little bit unsteady on her feet, you'll have seen that there was a grab handle for her to get in there. Nice little patio bistro area on the exterior there. And again, these decked areas can be made as big or as small as you require. Next slide. Of the turnkey package meaning that we do absolutely everything for the build. Yeah, so we fit the kitchen, design the kitchen to suit your requirements with 2 different styles of kitchen. This one that you're looking at here is a shaker kitchen. There's been a few modifications in this kitchen that she required. On the right hand side you can see a 70-30 integrated fridge freezer, and on the left you can see she's had the cooking appliances fitted into a tall unit. Our standard kitchen range is quite nice, that's included in the price, but you can take options to make the kitchen exactly how you wish. Cooking facilities, all our standard fitment is what you're looking at there. So the worktop, the upstand at the back of the worktop, the ceramic hob, the backsplash, the chimney cooker hood, and the cupboards and handles, they're all standard fits for our builds. She chose a stainless steel single sink, which again is a standard build. The wall cupboards, but in this kitchen, which makes it a little bit more bespoke, because of the seating of the annex and where it's sat in the garden, left and right you can see that we have windows. We'd normally only have 1 window in an annex, but this allows a lot more natural light to come in, so we designed it to have 2 windows in the kitchen. You can see we've got a nice flowing living space here. There's a small space for the dining area. Our standard fit flooring in there. We have 4 good selections of flooring for you to choose from. You may decide that you want to have your annex carpeted, but that's our standard fitment floor all the way through. Those are also standard fitted doors. The oak veneered doors are standard specification for us. The illumination, as you can see, is also a soft white light spots throughout, which give a very, very good light array. A nice cozy living area. All connections for the TV are provided too. We place the sockets around the building how you would like them and where you want to position things. As you can see, Janet likes her standard lamp, which is beautiful Art Deco Lalique glass top lamp. I have to say that because she'll tell me off if I haven't mentioned it. She absolutely adores that lamp. It's been in 5 different properties as she's moved over the years. So good size living space, and that space can be made as big or as small depending on the size of the annex that we're governing for you. And then we talk about our bathroom. Now, we note it as a bathroom, but this is actually a shower room. And we have 3 options for shower rooms. So this is our standard shower room with a walk-in shower. Again, when I say standard, this is a standard shower room. There is 2 optional extras in that shower room. One is the mirrored bathroom cabinet, and the other one is the grab handle in the shower. Everything else is standard to our build. So all the tile boarding, which has no grout lines, which is floor to ceiling, the low threshold shower tray. Now, what we've just changed our specification to, and most people will agree with this, the twin doored vanity unit that you can see underneath the sink, we've actually just changed that to a twin drawer option. It tends to be that you have things with a cupboard, things get pushed to the back and you can't see where they are, or you forget that they're there. If you've got drawers, it's much easier to view. So that's what we've just changed in standard specification. We can revert back to that should you wish to do so. And of course, all of our shower rooms have frosted glass. The other options for this room would be a full wet room. Understandable for anybody who's ever been in a wet room, then there is no shower tray at all. The water from the dual-headed shower goes straight down the drain in the floor. And we also have the option for a bathroom. Some ladies still prefer to bathe. So that would still come with the shower as standard. And a bathroom costs a little extra and a wet room costs a little bit more extra from there. Lots of different colours from you to choose for as well. So now we're going to have a little bit of a walkthrough of our most popular models. And all these walkthrough videos are available on our website. So if you go onto our website, you can literally walk through each individual model. There is a video on each model. But our most popular models that you can see are on screen. The Bawtry is our most popular one bedroom, and that's probably our smallest standard annex. And the Wheatley is our most popular 2-bedroom annex. And if I mention size and dimensions at this point before we move forward, the Wheatley, when we talk about size and dimensions for people to picture things in their head, if you were to order a new bungalow through Wimpy, Redrow, Beezer Homes, whoever the manufacturer is, they will give you a bungalow, 2-bedroom bungalow, between 56 and 64 square meters on the ground. So that's the footprint of a modern bungalow. Our Wheatley at 10 by 6, the standard Wheatley that is 60 square meters on the ground. So when I say it's a timber frame bungalow, that's exactly what it is. Bawtry comes in at a 5 by 7, which is one of our smaller dwellings, but we can bespoke any size dwelling. Now, Ollie will explain a little bit later about standard planning and a thing called the certificate of lawfulness. And what you tend to find in our brochure is that the biggest one that we show as a footprint drawing would be the Wheatley Extra Plus at 17 meters by 6.5 meters. We can go up to 20 meters and we can go up to 6.8 meters in width. So floor plan examples, which is what we've just pulled up for the Bawtry. Every model throughout the brochure will have 3 models, and these are just the core issues. The Bawtry has the standard, the extra, and the extra plus. And again, you can see straight away that we're going from a bigger building each time, and the price will flow with that. And again, these buildings can be a flat pent roof or it can be a pitched roof. You can see how these are easy to be bespoke as well by moving the rooms around internally. And we can make them slightly longer, slightly wider, however it needs to fit your project. Again, standard Wheatley, as you can see, that's the 10 meters by 6 meters. When we go to the extra, that's 13.5 meters by 6.5 meters. And then the extra plus 17 meters by 6.5 meters. So at the extra plus, you are looking at what you would normally look at as a dormer bungalow. Now that's nearly 100 square meters on the floor. Okay. So we're now going to talk a little bit about openness. Now, one or two of you may have already taken the opportunity to visit one of our annexes. We firmly believe you cannot fully understand the true quality, size, and overall feel of our annexes without visiting one in person. That's why we're very proud to introduce the Open Us initiative. Our past customers will open their annex doors for you to go in and explore and learn about the annex and the different annex experiences that they've had. It's your chance to step inside and look around and ask questions directly to those people who have experienced our build firsthand. We're the only annex provider that actually capable of doing such an offer, and we have over 100 open house visit sites around England and Wales. We don't attend the visit with you. We organise the visit for you to go and meet the person who's living in the annex. So there's no sales banter or anything like that. It's for you to genuinely find out how the project went, sit in the warmth of the annex, discuss anything that you want about annex life with our customers. I think we've actually just turned 125 sites that you can go and visit. You can click on the PR code in the bottom to find an annex near you, or you can simply go on our website and do it exactly the same. You'll then contact one of our ladies in the office who will organise everything for you, find the closest one to you. And once you've had a really good look through the brochure and you've got to that stage, you'll have an idea of what size and dimensions of annex, because all of our annexes are different. Out of the brochure, in the years that I've worked here, I've probably built exactly what's in the brochure a handful of times. Most people want to alter them to make them to them. Okay? Do recommend that you do this. It's very, very, very important. I'm now going to hand over to my esteemed colleague, Ollie. He's forgotten more than I know about planning, I suppose. He's the expert by far. He's going to go through the planning permission and make sure you're fully aware of what is required. Thank you, Ollie.
No worries, nice. Yeah, so good to speak to you all. Obviously, we're going to have a bit of a quick rattle through the planning side of things for annexes. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to mention them at the end, and I'd be more than happy to discuss that with you, because it's one of those burning hot topics, isn't it, planning? So we handle all of IHUS's planning applications on their behalf, and the biggest question we get asked is, does my annex need planning permission? And as you can see, the simple answer is yes, it does. As soon as you introduce primary living accommodation into an outbuilding, you need to obtain consent, because it goes from this incidental use to more of an ancillary one, which doesn't benefit from permitted development rights, unfortunately. Now, one good thing that IHUS do offer, which is a fantastic offer in my opinion, and quite unheard of in our industry, especially these days, is they offer a money back planning guarantee. So we're so confident in being able to get consent for you for your annex that IHUS are willing to take that on board and give you your money back if we don't secure consent, which is amazing, really. In essence, risk-free planning, which, like I said, is pretty unheard of. So that's a fantastic offer which IHUS do. And as you can see, 94% success rate we have, which is really good. 82% is the national average. So we're doing pretty well. We're very proud of that statistic. So that's good. Now, before we get into the different types of planning that we do initially offer a service to IHUS which they use, which is like a feasibility sort of service. So when you have your consultation with Nigel, or you put an inquiry in, we will have a look at that at your site initially and just look at any planning constraints. So is it in the green belt? Are there flooding issues? Is it in the grounds of a listed building? Is it in an area of outstanding national beauty? Are there any red flags that we need to know right from the outset, which could then sort of help you design or may influence your project in some way? So we put all this information together, we will then look at any precedents in the local area. We'll look through our records to see how that council has determined annex applications in the past, because we've sort of worked with most of them these days. So we'll have all that insight and all that information. Then we'll give that to IHUS, and they'll pass it on to you. And it just gives you a good insight, and it sort of manages expectations from the outset, and can really sort of help influence the design and your project. And we found that to be invaluable, and it really helps us get consent, because we know if we make a few changes here and there, if we move it back away from that fence or from that tree, it will more likely get consent. So that really helps. So we do that from the outset. Now, as I said, we need to get planning for your annex. So we do that in two different ways. The first one is one that you're probably familiar with, the householder planning application, perhaps one that you've used yourself. And the other option we also use is a certificate of lawfulness for the siting of a mobile home. Now, what's the difference between these two applications? Well, the first one, the householder planning application, perhaps you're familiar with this. This is the application you would use to do any works to your house that need permission, loft extension, rear extension, whatever it's going to be. Any works planned to your house that need permission, you would use a householder planning application. Now, what this does, this gets you planning consent from the council for how the building is going to look, where it's going to go, how big it's going to be, where it's going to be sited on your site, and how it's going to be used. And then you get permission for that in that place, in that location, how it's going to look. And that's what you have to stick to. So that involves obviously a set of drawings. So when Nigel comes to see you, he'll design out the building and take all your design wants and needs and your aspirations, and then he'll design your perfect dream annex. Once that's done and he's taken on board any sort of pre-application or that initial feasibility advice we've given him, he then formulates that. And once you've signed that off, we get this planning pack from IHUS. This is all your drawings, so it's elevations, floor plans, where it's going to go on site. We will then start to assess those drawings, and we'll produce a planning statement. So in this planning statement, it's a quite comprehensive document, and it looks at the drawings and assesses them against the local planning policies. So each council has their own planning policies, which we'll look at. We'll also assess it against the national planning policies, which govern national sites and what the council should take on board too. And also we'll look at any appeal precedents or any case law, so any high court decisions which may back up our arguments, or any precedents in the local area. And then we'll put all this into a document. And in essence, what we're trying to do is convince the council to say yes. And we hand that document to them, and then they'll start to assess it. So the application process is about 8 to 10 weeks. It takes us a week or so to get the application submitted. And once it's submitted, we'll look a bit more of the process in a minute, but your neighbours are consulted upon. So any third parties, such as your neighbours, the parish council, highways, then if there are other concerns like flooding, archaeological, arboricultural, so trees, ecology, all the different departments at the council will get a notification along with your neighbours saying, Mr. and Mrs. Jones have submitted an application at this address. What do you think? And then you can put your comments in if you wish. So hopefully you can be on good terms with your neighbours. And if not, yeah, they do have the opportunity to object, unfortunately. And in my time of doing this, 15 plus years now, it brings out the worst in people, unfortunately. So don't be disheartened if you get an objection. It happens quite a lot, and it's just the way it is. But it doesn't mean it's going to be a no. We can work through those and work with the officer if there are any comments coming forward. So that's not a problem at all. And then once that decision is granted, which is hopefully the case, it'll be subject to a number of conditions. Now, there's usually three main ones. The first one is you have to start the project within 3 years. So you don't have to finish it. You just have to commence the build within 3 years. The second one is you have to build it in accordance with the plans that we've submitted and got approved, which is sort of common sense. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, is that you have to use it in an ancillary way. Okay, so you can't separate it off. You couldn't use it as an independent dwelling. You couldn't subdivide it. You couldn't rent it out. And that is just to make sure that you're not going to use it as a separate dwelling, because dwellings in back gardens, most of the time are not usually allowed. Backland development has been sort of frowned upon for a number of years now for many reasons. But yeah, that's just to ensure you don't use it as a separate dwelling. And if you did if you did want to in the future, you can apply to do so. You just couldn't do it under that application. So that's the house order planning application. Okay. Now, the next thing we do is we also submit what they call a certificate of lawfulness for a mobile home. Now, you may think, oh my goodness, a mobile home, they're ugly, they have wheels. You may have preconceived ideas as to what a mobile home is, and quite rightly so. But what IHUS have done is that they have designed their suite of buildings, all the things you see in their brochure and on their website, to comply with the lawful definition of what a mobile home is. Now, the legislation surrounding this definition of a mobile home, there's three key tests. It's size, so no wider than 6.8 and no longer than 20 meters, and an internal height measurement of 3.05 meters. So externally, you could have 4 meters, but as long as that internal measurement from the floor to the top of the ceiling is 3.05, then that's the size test. Then you have construction. So can you demonstrate that you're constructing it not from hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of pieces? So what IHUS do is that they've designed it in a way that is sort of modular, so like in kit form. So that comes to site, and that's great. And then what happens? They'll then assemble it together to create your mobile home. Now, any building wider than 4.5 meters, okay, has to be built as a twin unit mobile home because 4.5 meters is the maximum width you can transport on the UK roads, okay? So what the legislation has stated that sort of 4.5, 4.7 meters upwards, up to the maximum width of 6.8 for a caravan, you then have to build it in two pieces. Now, IHUS have designed their buildings to comply with this if you have to. So if you're over the 4.5 meters in width, they build the two parts next to each other. And then the final active assembly is the bringing of these two parts together. Now, IHUS have had extensive talks with an engineer and they've come up with a design and a method to do this, which is compliant. And they've documented that and it works really, really well. So we know that we can conform to that construction test as part of that legal definition. Now, the third test is mobility, okay? So that's where people get a bit confused. Your mobile home doesn't have to have wheels. It doesn't have to have a tow bar. Um, as long as you can demonstrate that the building or the structure is capable of being lifted or moved, then that's all you have to do. You will never move it. You'll never, or will hopefully never have to move it or never want to. But if you had to, is it capable? Now, once again, IHUS have employed an engineer and he's looked at every single building IHUS offer and he has designed a framework that if they used that, they could technically lift the building. They've looked at the deflection, they've looked at the engineering calculations to make sure that those buildings won't collapse if you try to move it. And they can demonstrate that through technical details that they can comply with that mobility. Now, a lot of people say, well, yeah, the road's not wide enough. There's no way you'll be able to move it once you've assembled it in my garden. That actually doesn't matter. There's lots of case law to say that whether or not you can move it, whether you get a crane close enough, whether the road's wide enough, has no bearing whatsoever. Is the building capable of being moved? That's what the test is. So those three tests, construction, size, and mobility. If you comply with those three tests, your structure can be considered a mobile home. Now, why is that important? Well, because the high courts have said that a mobile home does not need planning because it's not technically a building, even though it looks like one, even though it's built pretty much no different to your normal annex. And when you look at their host website, they are mobile homes, which is quite incredible, isn't it? Such a broad definition that the courts have said, well, if you can comply, you don't technically need planning permission. So at that point, it becomes a use of the land. So as we said, you still have to use it in that ancillary way. So, a family member or someone who's close to you, you couldn't rent it out. You couldn't separate it off in the future without getting express consent from the council. Now, what we do once again, you'd have your building designed. They're usually identical to the annex application, the plans. We then compile another planning application and a planning statement looking at all the legislation, looking at all the law, and we will then sort of spell out to the council why we think that this structure meets the legal definition to be considered a mobile home and therefore doesn't require planning permission. And then we submit that once again to the council. It takes about 8 to 10 weeks with the council. Now, there's a few differences with this to the householder application because unlike the householder application, which is consulted on by the neighbours, you don't have this with a lawful development certificate or a certificate of lawfulness. The neighbours are usually not notified. So this can work well if perhaps relationships are fractured somewhat or there's problems there, then that's a good way to get around having the neighbours know. And also it sort of speeds it up a little bit. We're not waiting for ecology to come back or archaeological departments at the council which won't go slow. So yeah, that can really help. And then, like I said, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks. And then if they agree that our proposal meets this lawful definition, they will then issue their certificate of lawfulness to say, yes, we agree that what you're doing is lawful and you can go ahead and do it as you said you were going to do so. And these applications are usually reviewed by the council's legal team. So it will go to the officer at the council, they will look at it, and then I'll pass on their recommendation to the legal department of the council, and then they will then sign it off. So we know it's all legitimate and it gives you that peace of mind that what you're doing is lawful. Now, one thing to keep in mind that a mobile home has to be sited within your curtilage. Okay, now curtilage and garden are slightly different. Okay, is where the confusion lies. So what the courts have said is that the curtilage of your property is usually the land immediately around it. So the land that you will mow, the land where you may have some, I don't know, pot plants or some other garden paraphernalia, that's your curtilage. Now, if you bought a bit of field behind your house, or I don't know, there's a bit of a paddock or there's an orchard, that's potentially not going to be your curtilage. So, what we will do as part of that feasibility study at the start of the process, we will usually just highlight if we have some concerns that, well, actually, it's quite a big residential plot, but actually the curtilage is much tighter around the house because there's other land involved, we will let you know. And then we'll say, well, you have to try and keep your mobile home within that area. If you're dead set on using the paddock or you're dead set on using the orchard to the rear, then what we would have to do is apply to extend your curtilage into that area. So we would send an application to the council, and this would have to be done before we submit the lawful development certificate to change the use of that land to residential curtilage. That's another whole process. It's not always easy, but we can do it, and we have been successful. But it's worthwhile keeping that in mind that if you want the path of least resistance, keep it in your existing curtilage. But if you're dead set on a different area, we can work with you and advise accordingly. Now, when you look at the process for both of these applications, okay, is they're very similar in their time frame. So you're looking at sort of 8 weeks. We say 8 to 10 weeks just to give us a bit of flexibility, but around 8 weeks. The certificate of lawfulness can come in much sooner because you don't have to go through this consultation. But on average, I would say about 8 weeks. So week one, we would submit it. Weeks 1 to 3, you're looking at the council reviewing the documents that you've submitted to make sure they have enough information to make a decision. So that's the validation of the application. They need certain criteria to be met in order for them to make their decision. Week 3, you're looking at the letters going out to your neighbours for the householder application and other third-party consultees. Week 4, for both applications, you're looking at a site visit from the case officer dealing with your application. They'll come to site, take a few photos, peer over the fence, that kind of thing. And then week sort of 4 to 5, then onwards, they'll start reviewing all the information we've submitted. They'll look at their photos and their site assessment, and they'll start making a decision. That's when, at that point, we'll start making contact with the officer. Have you got any concerns? Are there any problems? What can we do to help? And if there are some concerns, maybe a neighbor has objected and they're worried about overlooking or they're worried about impact on their garden, like the massing, whatever it's going to be. Can we find a design solution to overcome this? perhaps we can reduce the height or raise the fence height a little bit. Whatever it's going to be, we can work with that. Perhaps they're not overly happy with the materials. Can we change that? And then we'll try and find a compromise and obviously come back to you as the client to make sure you're happy with those suggestions. And that really helps. That sort of being proactive with the officer can really help get that decision through during those 8 weeks. Because if they just refuse it, you then have to resubmit and go through the whole process again. So we like to get in there quick. And if there are any concerns, hopefully deal with it during that application process. So overall, about 8 weeks, and then hopefully you'll get your nice decision and you can crack on and it's an approval. Now, a couple of sort of case studies here just to show you how we added value at NAPC. Now, the first one was in the grounds of a Grade 2 listed building. It was in the Cotswold Conservation Area 2 and the AONB. So pretty much, apart from it being in the green belt and the flood zone, it had everything going against it. Now, we submitted the application. It got validated, went through to the assessment stage, and the conservation officer at the council picked it up and said, "No way, I'm not happy with this. It's the impact on the listed buildings too great, and the conservation area is going to detract from its significance. So you're going to have to come up with something a bit better." So we had some lengthy discussions with the officer. He said, "Well, what would you like? What could we do to overcome it?" And we can see there, what that photo in that picture was not what we submitted initially. So we had to raise the pitch of the roof to make it a bit more like barn in its style, barn-like, which is quite common in the local area. We had to use natural stone tiles. We had to use timber cladding, timber windows, and then we got all that signed off by the client. Well, it was during the same application. Submitted some new drawings to the council, and then the officer said, "Yeah, I'm much more happier with that." So it just goes to show once again, being engaging early with the case officer, being sort of having a compromise on both sides, allowed us to get that approval through. And you can see it's quite a stunning looking building. But it also goes to show that IHUS can be adaptable in their design. So if there is a problem from a planning point of view that's design led, we can overcome it through design. So different materials, different design of the building if we had to, and that really helps get applications through. Now, the middle sort of case study there. Now, this once again was in the grounds of a Grade 2 listed building. It was also within the green belt where any new development is usually a no. But what we did here is we submitted, which we do for all of IHUS's applications, we submit a dual application. So we submit the householder application, and we also at the same time submit the certificate of lawfulness for the mobile home, and they run side by side together during that process. Now, we do that for a number of reasons. The first reason, it gives us two chances of success. We want to keep up that 94% success rate. Also, as in this case, it can act as what they call a fallback position. Okay, so in this case, Grade 2 listed building, green belt. The officer said, "You've got no chance." So we were like, "Fine. Can you go and have a look at the mobile home application we've also submitted?" Because, as we know, the courts have said that is not a building. So the green belt restricts buildings in those areas. So they said, "Fine, we'll go and have a look at it." It went up to their legal team. They came back to me and said, "Yep, we're happy to approve this because it meets the lawful definition of a mobile home. It's not considered to be development. So there's nothing we can do. So we'll get that approved and we'll send you the decision." Fantastic. What a result for the client. What the high courts have said is that if an application is going to be approved through a different form of legislation, so the Caravan Act in this case, that then acts as what they call a fallback position. Okay. Now, the fallback position is then a really strong material consideration in the annex application. And what the courts have said, well, if they're going to go ahead and build it anyway through a different form of legislation, really, you should take that into account when you're making the decision when it comes to the annex application, which was going to be refused. So we gave the council this high court decision and said, "This is a precedent. You've got to take it on board." They said, "Yep, we'll have a look at it. Thank you very much." went back to their legal team, came back to us and said, yeah, we agree with the assessment. It is a fallback position. And this then allows us to approve the annex application, which we were going to refuse in the first place. So this two-pronged approach is great in situations like this, where we can leverage the council, I suppose, or strong arm them into approving both applications, and then you can decide on which one you want to go down. Sometimes it doesn't always work, and you may just get the mobile home, but at least you've got that application. You can go ahead and get your annex. So that it works really well. It's been quite effective for a number of years now, and most councils who we work with understand the process and are coming around to us doing that. So that's really good. The right hand one was just again goes to show being proactive with the case officer and being amenable to making changes. So we submitted the application. The neighbour objected, saying it was too high. It was going to be quite dominant on the boundary. It's going to cause overshadowing and privacy issues. So the officer went to site. He did his site assessment and said, "Yep, I agree with the neighbour. You're going to have to look at the design." So we went back to IHA, said, "Well, if we can try and get it reduced by 300 mil, so just under half a meter, I think we can get it through." So they had a look, did some clever engineering, got the height down by 300 mil. We revised the drawings back into the officer, and he said, "Great." He said, "It's not perfect, but I can see you've tried, and there's a compromise both sides to be had." And he goes, "I'm now happy to approve that application." So what a great result. And the neighbour was happy, and the officer was happy, and more importantly, you as the client would be happy too. So early engagement and making those changes got that application over the line. So just three sort of case studies to show how we add value. We're very proud of what we do at NAPC, and you're in good hands. That's all we do is annexes and mobile homes and garden rooms. So we know the industry very well, and we've got good relationships with most of the councils now. So that really helps too. I'm not a council tax expert, but I've been asked just to mention it in this presentation because I know a little bit about it. So council tax for annexes. Now, when you have an annex, it does trigger an increase in your council tax, okay? But there are some things that you can do. If it's a family member moving in to the annex, you can apply for a 50% reduction. So say they're going to increase it by £1,000 a year, you can apply for 50% off, so it'd only be £500. Now each council is slightly different, but usually you have that 50% open to you. Now, if the person moving into the annex is a relative, is over the age of 65, is dependent on you for their care, and also doesn't have a holiday home or a second home in Cornwall, for instance, then they can actually apply for full exemption to the increase in the council tax fee. So it's worthwhile looking at that. Each council is slightly different in the way they assess this and the things that they offer. So I would always advise you to speak to your council, but there are, on most occasions, either the reduction or the full exemption to apply for. So worthwhile keeping that in mind and trying to get that if you can comply with those conditions, and it's worthwhile saving yourself some money. So that's sort of a quick whiz from me in terms of the planning side of things. If you've got any questions, like I said, happy to answer those at the end, but I'll hand back to Nigel to talk about the build process.
Thanks, Ollie. Always professional as always, my friend. Oliver and his team, Oliver's been quite coy there. His team are second to none. We are very proud to have them as a partner to us. They do an amazing job for our clients, and long may it continue. So we've now got into a position. We've gone down the route, and we've now got planning permission. So what happens next is the build process. So right, as soon as you've got hold of your planning permission, we'll be in touch prior to that anyway, trying to designate you a build slot. So we're prepared before we've come out of planning to start the process of building your annex. So as we come out of planning, we've got the pre-construction. So pre-construction is mainly the build surveys to make sure that we're connecting in the right place, testing the soil. Our foundations, we have three styles of foundation. we have an hexagonal screw pile, which are literally artesian screws up to 3 meters in length that are driven into the ground. So they sit on a plinth for the annex to sit on. Second one is a standard concrete pile with a thing called a swift plinth, which is like a little pyramid with an adjustable thing for making the levels perfect. And worst case scenario would be a concrete pad. So as we go from planning into week 1, we'll start with the build week 1. We'll start with the groundwork. So digging the trenches that take the power, water and drains. Could be that you're on a septic tank. It might be that we're actually going to produce you a new water treatment plant or a new septic tank just solely for the annex. It depends on your neighbourhood and it depends on the build. But most of the time we're connecting to the drains of the main house. So that's the wastewater, the storage lines, we connect to those, the power and the water from the house, because it's ancillary and subservient to the house, of course. So all groundworks, all the trenches have been done, preparations for the foundations, and then the foundations are in. And then week 2, we start with the superstructure. So we have all the materials delivered to build the annex, and that superstructure goes up within 7 days. It's a joy to behold when you see our build teams do it. You can't believe how quick it goes up. You'll scratch your head a couple of times. You'll be surprised how many people take a photograph every morning, every night, just to see how it can go, how it goes on. And then we go into week 3 when we've got the first fixing installation. First fixing installation, making sure that we comply to the build regulations and building code for the installation. And we do take a big tick for Part L legislation in building regulations. That means probably nothing to you. So I'll give you a little bit of a quick overbrief. Part L is for ventilation and insulation. All buildings in the United Kingdom through Build UK must comply to a certain building regulation. And that is 0.28. So everything must come under 0.28. So making sure that we've got airtight buildings, that they're ventilated properly, they're insulated to keep on energy costs and green credentials. You'll be very pleased to hear that at the bottom of that screen, you can see ISO 1401, ISO 9001, and you can see that we've UCAS as well. That's to prove our credentials for building and our credentials for building regulations. You probably cannot find a better insulated home than what we produce. To give you those in number context, remember I said 0.28. Well, your roof space is 0.18, living space 0.15, and floor space 0.18. So we're over-engineered to the standard Build UK rules, which is a good point for our customers. We then go into week 4 when we start plasterboarding and plastering the rooms out, because on the classic range, not the 362 range, it is like a house. You've got plastered walls, so it's easier for a finish. Then we go to week 5, it's decoration and second fix. Second fix means your kitchen's going in, your shower room, your wet room, your bathroom. All of those fixtures are going at that point. Week 6, all the external works are finished off. So the finalisation of the roofing materials, the guttering, the soffits, the fascias, and the finalisation of making sure all the cladding is exactly how it should be. And then week 7 to week 8, you're in commissioning and handover. Now, when we get to the end of our build, you will have your project manager and probably the customer liaison officer. There's a lady called Jan. They'll come out to you and they'll go through all the commissioning of the goods inside, how to work your fridge freezer, how to work the hob, how the heating system works, and so on and so forth. Nice and easy on instructions, making sure you're compliant with everything on the build. And then what happens then is a building control certificate is produced. That then goes with the title deeds of the property, and that then adds value to the house as well, knowing that it's been built to those standards. Now, it does say 1 to 8 weeks. Yeah. Now, that's depending on the size and dimensions of the annex, of course. We would always say 8 to 12 weeks for build, just in case it's a bigger build or it's a pitch roof build. Oliver is very, very honest with his 8 to 10 week rule. So we normally say from the day you say, Nigel, that's exactly what I want, it's normally 6 to 7 months and you're moved in. You're actually living in your new home. We have 10 build teams working 50 weeks of the year. So our build schedule is set out perfectly. So we know what's coming. So you don't have to wait. You may have a property to sell. And if that be the case, then you might not start your build until 2 or 3 months after we've gained planning, when the money's come through from your house, the sale of your house. So that's the build process. We'll move on from there on. So what we're going to do now, and just a little bit of respite listening to two boring men's voices, we're going to play you a little video. There's a lot of information that you've had to take on so far today, but this is a very, very, very pertinent video. This is the Horton family. Jenny lived in Newcastle and her family lived in Crewe. She was recently widowed and she needed to spend time with the family. So let's play this video. It'll give you a little bit of inspiration of their story.
When I found out in 2018 that Jen and Kieran were expecting their first baby, I decided I really needed to be closer to them. Before anyone buys an iHus, they need to go and look at one. I went to look at one down in Shropshire and I burst into tears when I walked into the house, and Roger said to me, "Oh no, she doesn't like it." And I said, "No, I love it." We did get quotes for other things. We didn't just look at iHus, but it was astronomical. The cost of building, just the brick building, never mind the plumbing, plastering, electrics, all that. The after service of iHus is brilliant because I had a small little leak in the bathroom and we couldn't work out what it was, and they replaced the toilet straight away. So they come back, they put everything right. It's great. It's the best thing I ever did.
So what would you say to anybody who's thinking of doing this?
Do it. Go for it.
Well, if you want a granny annex for yourself or a loved one, why don't you come and see one? There are 70 show homes in the open house community, so why don't you come and meet the families, have a look round, exactly what I've been doing.
So join me, Tony Blackburn, as I meet families up and down the UK to find out just what makes an iHus Annex so special.
Okay, so that does give you a genuine idea of annex living. And as I said right at the very start, going and viewing an open house, going and seeing somebody's home is paramount to what we do. Our brand ambassador there, Mr. Tony Blackburn, his mum's 101 this year, and he's got an annex in his garden, and it's his mum. Sorry, it's his mother-in-law. Let me get that correct. She's been in her annex for quite some time, and Tony was very proud to come and help us out. So now we're going to move into the most important part of the day, and that's question time. So if I can first of all say, you can open your microphones to ask questions, please do so. But I'm going to cover the questions that have been already sent in to us first of all. And this is from a very lovely young lady called Leslie Reed. Thank you for your questions, Leslie. So I'm going to cover them with you, and there's one there for Ollie as well. So the first one is how to finance the build prior to selling your current house. Well, finance it's not something that we fully cover, but we do give really good advice on our website. You can click on the link on finance, and there's a couple of webinars that we've already done on financing where you'll get some benefit from. But I'll give you a case that I'm currently dealing with, where the lady and gentleman have actually took out a bridging loan for their property to build the annex while the house has been sold. Now, the house was sold more or less straight away, but they're waiting for the legal side of things and things changing hands and contracts being exchanged. So they've took out a bridging loan for 4 months. The bank very happy to do so because they can see the process. And we're here to assist that. If you need any letters or authorization saying that you've actually progressed with the contract with us, we could do it that way. a lot of people also will probably live with the family if there's space, but that's not always the case. So Leslie, in that question, please have a look on the website for any further information. Yeah, and if you need any more help, at the end you'll see there's another contact details for you to give us a call personally. Your second question: are the utilities for the IHUS charged separately or included as part of the main residence bills? Okay, so there is a rule of thumb that we've worked out with our clients. Now, we can place in the annex or in the house an electric counter meter. That's not a smart meter. That just literally counts the units of power that are being used by the annex. So when the electricity bill comes, you can then see exactly how many units the annex has used, so you can share the bill. If you are on a water meter or you're on water rates, now a water meter, if it's a 2-bedroomed annex, you would pay exactly 1/4 of the water bill. If it's a 1-bedroom, you would pay slightly less. Water rates, it's 1/3. That's how it's worked out. And that's from case studies that we've done over the years. But it cannot have its own power supply. Remember, this is an ancillary and subservient annex from the house. So if you're going to put it in quoted abbreviations, you could say it's actually an extension of the house. It's just not attached. Okay. Next question from Leslie. How efficient is the insulation when the temperatures drop below 0? Well, all I can say to you is I've got quite a few customers who didn't turn their heating on until they got to December, and then turned it off a couple of weeks ago. So they're very energy efficient. The heating system is completely and utterly thermostatically controlled. So you can set the temperature in each room, and that's the temperature that room will stay at. But I've got customers that turn the heating system off all the way through the summer because it's so well insulated. And it is part of the Part L legislation. We tick the box to get you that sign. And the final question from Leslie, which is aimed towards Oliver. How exact is the 50% of garden space ruling adhered to, and can IHUS be modified to adjust this?
So it's the 50% rule is irrelevant because that's only for permitted development rights. So PD rights is as legislation again, which allows you to construct outbuildings without permission. It's sort of been like, it's like pre-approved permission, and one of those conditions is no more than 50% of your garden. But because we're getting planning permission, you can go to whatever size you like. 50% is a good rule, a rule of thumb to sort of gauge not overdeveloping your plot. But if your garden was, I don't know, 200 square meters, you could easily put a 120 square meter building into that and it wouldn't be a problem. If it was 100 square meters and you could do 60, 55, doesn't matter. But yeah, don't worry about the 50% rule. That doesn't apply.
Okay, so that's the 4 questions that had been submitted prior to the webinar. Now the field is open for everyone who wants to ask a question. Could I ask a question first? OPPOA 53 at the bottom of your screen, sir. I don't know your name. That'd be yourself, yeah. Your microphone is muted, so what's your name, sir?
Hello.
Hello, sir. What's the name?
Segrin Raj.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Arun. Have you any questions for us, sir?
Yeah, one of my questions was I think your colleague earlier on mentioned with regards to the annex cannot be used by anyone else but your family or dependents. Is that correct, or you cannot rent it out?
Yeah, it's not. It can be used by people who are not related to you, because that can still be an ancillary use. So it's a bit of a funny one, really. This ancillary argument is made up of lots of different ones. There isn't one thing that just say, well, that's it, and it's not ancillary. So if it is a family relative or it is someone who you know really well, then that's a much easier argument. If it's not somebody, then it becomes a bit more difficult and it weakens the ancillary argument. What the council will be concerned about is if you're renting it out as a separate unit of accommodation. So if you had a tenant in your annex and they never ever went anywhere near the main house and didn't ever go inside the main house and were paying you, I don't know, a good set amount of money each month and they were paying for all their bills and utilities, then that would be a problem. If it was a friend, for instance, he needed 6 months to live and you had some personal and private arrangement with them, there's no problem with that. But yeah, you just can't rent it out, that's all.
Okay, and that's even if you get permission from them, or you can't ask permission. It's not allowed.
No. So yeah, so you can apply. So we've had lots of clients who have had an annex for, I don't know, say an elderly relative, then the use is no longer needed.
Yeah.
And they then wanted to apply to change the use to a holiday let, which has been absolutely fine. We've got lots of case studies on that and been quite successful. It's not a problem. And one thing you can also do, which doesn't necessarily need permission, is use it for Airbnb. So Airbnb, depending on the degree of use, can still be ancillary. Okay, so there's sort of like a rule of thumb. Not 90 days or less a year can be considered still ancillary. So you wouldn't have to apply for a change of use to a holiday let. You could potentially use it for Airbnb. And that's what we advise our clients. If you're going to use it 365 days of the year, and there's going to be a few comings and goings from people using it as a holiday let, then I would advise getting permission for one, and you can just apply for that.
And that's through the council?
Yeah, through the council, yeah.
Okay.
If it's built as a rentable property, it would include VAT because it's a business. So and it's normally done then as a building which is a separate dwelling, and it's not something that we could assist you with a separate dwelling anyway.
Okay.
David and Liz, you've got your hand up.
Yes, hi there.
Hello, welcome. Thank you very much for attending today.
Thank you. That's been very informative. Thank you. Just a couple of questions to start. Just to clarify, then, you said in one of the first slides the annex must have a functional link to the main dwelling. What does that mean exactly?
So we're connecting the water, the power, and the drain.
What is the...
Yeah, so it's sharing access and services. So it's
That's correct,
the
yeah.
same point, really. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
On the ancillary use, we're planning, we're looking at the possibility of us, when we get too old to live in our current property, moving to our son's property, and we would be living in the annex. So it's a kind of classic situation.
Yeah.
What do we mean by what would be the minimum? Could we live in that annex without ever setting foot in the main building?
Yes, you could.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. And then I'm a bit unclear. Sorry, I may have missed a simple point. Why do you submit a dual application why not just submit the mobile application if you know there's a better chance? What is there in the householder planning application that adds to that, as it were?
When we look at a couple of things, David, that might assist you understanding why we do a dual. As a planning application, getting planning permission, the householder planning application, it does make the annex gain value to the property quicker.
Okay, yeah.
And that's one of the key points. With the mobile home, it will take a little bit longer for the value of such to go up. And some estate agents wouldn't deem that the mobile home as an ancillary dwelling, although we know that it is. So again, we would always endeavour to try and get full planning, but we know that we build exactly the same. Yeah, whether it's full planning on the same foundations, the build is exactly the same, barring it being in two halves. And I've got a question for you, David. You saw the photographs that we went through right at the very start of that lovely Hickleton annex. Could you tell me whether that was built under the standard planning or whether it was built under the certificate of lawfulness?
Which one was that?
Oliver, can you flick back through the slides to the Hickleton, please? When were we showing? Yeah, it's going to just bit more. Might need to go back a couple, boss. There you go.
Okay. So is that standard planning or mobile?
Is that mobile home?
I suspect it's mobile.
Why is that, sir?
I've
caught you on the hop. That was a blooming good guess, though. It was a very good guess.
It was a guess, yes.
Yeah. Look between the French doors and the window.
Okay.
And you can see, I'm hoping you can see a couple of these buildings behind me, but this very large building here above my shoulder, which is a timber construction one, that's built on the mobile home. And this one, and Oliver will back me up here, the reason we went for a certificate of lawfulness on this one is the council just are anti annexes, and Oliver and his team managed to get us through on a certificate of lawfulness. But unless somebody actually walks up and points to it, you wouldn't know. You would never know. And it's built exactly the same. It's just that because of the sign-off sheets that are provided, whether it's certificate of lawfulness or it's householder planning with the title deeds means that that's a permanent dwelling, not classified as a mobile home. Therefore, it adds value quicker, just quicker. Yeah. And we might be talking 4 or 5 years. That's all, David.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Could I ask a question?
You certainly can, Liz.
What's the distance this is built from the house?
Is
this one that we're looking at here?
Any of the I heard.
Oh, again, the closest that I've built is 1.5 meters.
And what's the furthest?
I'm going out on Monday to visit a lady and gentleman in Crawley, and the annex is going to be about 70 meters away from the home. So they don't have a garden. Well, they do have a garden. I don't want to scare Oliver when he gets this application, but their land goes in a long, thin strip all the way down. And then they've got an orchard at one side and they've got a paddock at the other side. But there is no other buildings anywhere near their vicinity. And it's screened by a row of trees either side. Did you see Oliver smile there? Yeah. So where we need to position it out of the way of other things is about 70 meters away from the house.
And does
remember what David said? Sorry, David, to interrupt you. Remember what David said, though, Liz? You're sharing parking spaces, entranceway. You can't have a separate entrance. You can do what you want after we've left and we've built it and we've done planning, but you can't have separate access to the annex. So you can't have a separate gateway, a separate driveway. What you decide to do after we've built it and done it, that's completely up to you. But it's shared facilities. That's the whole idea of the ancillary and subservience.
Right. And sorry, just a matter of detail, really. So if you're sharing services, digging trenches in, that is part of the standard cost. I mean, normal part.
Yeah.
At what point does it then become under? Did the 70-meter build actually increase costs?
It does, yes. We, as part of our standard build, give the first 10 meters of connection to services. That's part of the standard build, David. A very good question to ask. Now, each individual case, each individual annex, what the process is, if you now decide, actually, from what I've learned today, we would like to progress further. The next step for you would be to organise a virtual consultation. So a Zoom meeting one-to-one with myself, yeah. Oliver and his team would prepare a preliminary planning report for us, and we would set out a virtual consultation. We would ask you to forward some photographs and some information, and we'd have a couple of hours sat down discussing where you want it in the garden, discussing the dimensions. You may have already sketched out something, exactly how you want that footprint to work for you. It could be that you want two large bedrooms, both en suite. Yeah, we can accommodate that as long as the annex size is correct. And if you look at the footprints that you've seen whether it's the Bawtry, the Hickleton, the Dunscroft, whatever it is in the brochure, if one of the footprints suits your requirements, and that's the outside dimension, what we do on the inside is retrospect. And we normally get asked at this point, can I have a log burner? Yeah. And every webinar we've had so far, can I have a log burner? Yes, you can have a log burner. It's not provided by IOS. That's a separate entity, but we will put everything in an annex so a log burner can be used. Any more questions? William, are you open to the question? Hello? Yes. Your question, sir.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. In terms of how far from the boundary of your property can...
Okay. How far from the boundary? Another good question. Right. Legally, for building, it's 600 millimeters in old feet and inches, 2 feet. However, if there is means of egress, so let's say the back of the building's gone up to the bottom fence, if one of those windows is means of fire egress, it's a 750 millimeters. We normally state for a rule of thumb a meter.
Okay.
So,
right,
for instance, if you were looking at a 10 by 6 and it was running up the garden, you'd measure a meter from the fence, a meter from the opposite fence, and let it come up the garden from there. So it'd be 11 meters to the front edge.
Okay.
The easiest way for us to work all that out for you, again, I would suggest that you book a virtual consultation. And I need to explain one more thing to you about costs, about pounds, shillings and pence. Yeah, because I'm from Yorkshire and we're based in Yorkshire and we're known for squeaking when we walk. Okay. Me and my father invented copper wire fighting over a 2p piece. So I when it comes to costs, right, you do not pay us a single nickel or dime until we're in a position for you to sign a contract and move forward. All the key point to that virtual consultation is to look at the viability of us being able to build an annex for you. And if we don't think we can do it, we will let you know straight away. And when it comes to whether you've been in touch with another builder who's had planning before or tried to get your planning before and you've been unsuccessful, I'm going to tell you this, and I'm going to tell you this with a hand on heart. If Oliver and his team can't get planning permission to build in your garden, there is nobody in this country that can. That's how good they are. And yes, I know I'm blowing a bit of smoke somewhere, but it's the truth. If they can't do it, nobody can. Simple as. So that's key to everything that we do. Hand up again, David. Fire away.
Yeah, quick question. So is everything we've discussed this afternoon true of the Pentus range?
Yes, exactly the same with the Pentus range. The Pentus range is a fixed range, though. You must understand that, David. That's not adaptable.
Right.
Yeah. So when people look at the Pentus, with it being such a stunning build, there might be key points of that you want to integrate into your home. Then we would take you down the classic route if you're wanting to alter things.
Right.
Yeah. And we would build that annex to suit the requirement. But the Pentus is in exactly the same point, David. It comes with the first 10 meters as well. Pentus range has a lot of things that are already included, not as options.